The first thing Ilen noticed was that the temple steps were still warm. That felt rude. Stone was not supposed to remember heat this well, especially after orbital fire had already moved on to more interesting targets. He paused halfway up the fractured marble, boots crunching through powdered relics that had probably once been sacred, and were now definitely slipping hazards. Somewhere behind him, a lieutenant was loudly arguing with a drone about whether smoke technically counted as hostile atmospheric interference. Ilen let them argue. The universe had earned a few minutes without his supervision. At the top of the steps, something shifted. Ilen's hand went to his sidearm out of habit, not urgency. If whatever was waiting for him had wanted him dead, it had already missed several very good chances. That was how his career usually worked. He took another step forward, and then another, until the broken columns opened onto a shallow terrace overlooking the battlefield below. She was kneeling. That alone was strange enough to warrant a second look. The species they'd been fighting didn't kneel. They stood, they charged, they exploded in very expensive ways. This one was still, head bowed, one hand braced against cracked stone as if gravity had personally offended her. Her armor flickered with a weak blue glow, like a machine stubbornly pretending it wasn't dying. When she lifted her head, Ilen found himself meeting eyes that were sharp, furious, and very much alive. Her ears were long, tapering back through tangled pale hair, and Ilen had the deeply unhelpful thought that if this were a different kind of mission, someone would already be making terrible fantasy jokes about it. He swallowed them. War zones were not appropriate venues for humor, mostly. "You took your time," she said, her voice rough but precise, filtered through a translator that hummed faintly as it adjusted to human phonetics. Ilen glanced at his wrist display, then back at her. "Sorry, traffic." She did not smile. That felt appropriate. Below them, the wreck of an alien starship smoldered, its hull split open like a ribcage. Human dropships circled cautiously, as if the planet might still decide to bite. Ilen was aware, dimly, of eyes on him. Cameras, sensors, command feeds waiting for him to do something sensible and preferably heroic. He crouched instead because his knees complained less when he did. "You are the victor," she said, not a question. "I've been accused," Ilen replied, "usually by people with worse aim." Her jaw tightened. "Then you know why I remain." He didn't, he could guess, and he hated guessing. "I know why most people stay in places like this. Pride, stubbornness, poor life choices." Her laugh caught him off guard. It was short, sharp, and immediately regretted, judging by the way she winced. "You wound me further, off-worlder." "Please," Ilen said, "I'm trying to help." "That is yet to be proven." She straightened with effort, clearly annoyed that her body refused to cooperate with her pride. The air around her seemed to vibrate, faint symbols shimmering briefly along the stone before fading again. Ilen's implants flagged the energy signature with a polite but concerned warning. Ancient tech, ritual grade, the kind of thing that always came with footnotes and consequences. "I am bound," she said, "by right older than your species' first Skypher. I may not rise, I may not flee, I may not die." "Those are my favorite options," Ilen muttered, her eyes narrowed. "You make mockery." "Of systems that don't explain themselves clearly," he said. "Yes, constantly." She studied him for a long moment, then exhaled slowly, as if conceding something unpleasant. "The rite permits survival only through selection. The victor must choose." "Choose what?" Ilen asked. "Lunch, allegiance, a commemorative mug." "You," she said flatly, "must choose me." The battlefield seemed very quiet all of a sudden. Ilen rubbed his face. He could already hear the debrief. The paperwork. The committee meetings that would last longer than the war itself. "You're telling me," he said carefully, "that an entire interstellar conflict has ended with what is essentially an alien adoption clause." Her lips twitched despite herself. When phrased that way, it sounds foolish. "I specialize in making terrible things sound foolish," Ilen said. "It helps me survive them." She shifted, her armor's glow dimming further. "Mock if you must. The law stands. If you refuse, I will remain here until the system completes its judgment. And what does that look like? She glanced at the steps beneath her. The warmth Ilen had noticed earlier pulsed once, faintly. Final. Ilen followed her gaze, then looked back at her face. She did not beg. That more than anything unsettled him. Above them, the sky cracked with distant thunder as another ship entered orbit. Ilen rose slowly, dusting off his gloves. He felt the weight of command settle around his shoulders, familiar and unwelcome. "All right," he said. "Let's start with names. If I'm going to accidentally trigger an ancient cosmic contract, I'd like to be polite about it." She inclined her head just slightly. "Salith." He nodded. "Okay, Salith, I'm Ilen, and I have a feeling this conversation is going to get significantly worse before it gets better." She met his gaze, something unreadable passing between them. "That," she said, "is the most honest thing you have said yet. The problem with emergency shelters built by ancient civilizations was that they assumed emergencies would be handled by people who understood the instructions. Ilen did not. He stood inside a circular chamber that had sealed itself the moment he'd stepped in, lights pulsing along the walls in a rhythm that suggested either hospitality or judgment. A disembodied voice was speaking in a language that had been dead long enough to be smug about it. His translator hesitated, then did its best, which was never reassuring. "Acknowledgement of survivorship pending," the device offered. "Pending is my least favorite status," Ilen said to the ceiling, "right after classified and on fire." Across from him, Salith sat on a low platform that had emerged from the floor without asking permission. She was no longer kneeling, which felt like progress, though the way she held herself suggested she was prepared to resume at a moment's notice out of pure spite. One of her long ears flicked, an unconscious tell Ilen was beginning to recognize as irritation. "You should not have entered alone," she said. "You should see my resume," Ilen replied. "It's mostly poor decisions followed by unexpected survival." The chamber chimed again. Symbols spiraled into the air, rearranging themselves as if the room were thinking very hard about them. Ilen's suit pinged with alerts that he ignored on principle. If the universe wanted him dead, it usually didn't bother with warning labels. Salith watched him with an expression that hovered somewhere between disbelief and reluctant amusement. "Your species is reckless." "Efficient," Ilen corrected. "We skip the dread and go straight to the consequences." A section of the wall dissolved into light, revealing what appeared to be a console, or an altar, or a hybrid mistake made by a culture that didn't see the need to separate religion from user interfaces. Ilen approached it cautiously. The surface rippled under his glove, responding like a living thing. "Oh no," he muttered, "it's touch-sensitive." "You have doomed us," Salith said calmly. "Not yet," Ilen said. "I haven't pressed anything." The translator lagged just enough to betray her quiet laugh. She covered it with a cough that fooled no one. "The rite does not expect improvisation." "Then it's about to learn," Ilen said. The console flared, projecting a cascade of symbols between them. His implants strained, pulling fragments of meaning from the chaos. Choice, bond, continuance, oversight. There was a footnote that felt judgmental. Salith's posture changed, becoming formal, ceremonial. "This chamber records the outcome. Whatever is decided here will be remembered." "By who?" "Everyone," she said. "Eventually." Ilen sighed. "No pressure." He glanced at her, really looked this time, not as an enemy, not as a symbol, but as someone who had survived long enough to be trapped by survival itself. "So," he said lightly, "hypothetically, if I trip and accidentally agree to something catastrophic, is there a reset button?" "There is no reset," she said, "only precedent." "That's worse," Ilen said. "I come from a civilization built entirely on regrettable precedents." The chamber pulsed again, impatient. A new prompt appeared, simpler this time, as if the system had decided to lower its expectations. Ilen reached out, then paused. "Before I do this," he said, "I need to know something." Salith tilted her head. "Ask." "Does this make you my responsibility?" he said, "or does it make me yours?" She considered that, long ears angling back thoughtfully. "Yes." He laughed, surprising himself. "Figures." He placed his hand on the console. The chamber hummed, deep and resonant, like a machine pleased to be useful after a very long nap. Light wrapped around his arm, not painfully, just insistently, as if taking note of him. Salith exhaled, a sound caught between relief and resignation. "You are unlike what I expected." "Disappointing?" Ilan asked. "Complicated," she said, "also on my resume." The light faded, the chamber settled. Somewhere something ancient finished recording an outcome and moved on to its next eternal task. Ilan withdrew his hand, flexed his fingers, and waited for the universe to drop the other shoe. Nothing happened. He looked at Salith. She looked back. For a moment neither of them spoke. "Well," Ilan said finally, "that could have gone worse." She nodded slowly. "It still might." He grinned. "There it is." The ship's balcony had never been meant for standing. It was a maintenance overlook, a place where technicians were supposed to clip themselves in and complain quietly while pretending not to notice the void below. Ilan stood there without clipping in, because he trusted gravity about as far as it trusted him. The battlefield stretched beneath the wrecked hull in uneven silence, smoke drifting lazily as if exhausted by the effort of destruction. Somewhere far away something exploded late, embarrassed it had missed its cue. Salith joined him without a sound. "I thought you would leave," she said. "I thought you would," Ilan replied. "Yet here we are, disappointing our expectations together." She leaned against the railing, careful with her weight. The rite's aftermath clung to her in subtle ways, systems no longer fighting her presence, the ship's dead interfaces no longer rejecting her. Ilan pretended not to notice the faint hum that followed her movements, like reality adjusting its posture. "You are quiet," she said. "I'm budgeting my words," Ilan said. "I overspent in the last crisis." Below them, human medics moved through the wreckage, their voices carrying faintly over open comms. Someone cracked a joke about hazard pay. Someone else laughed too hard. Ilan listened until it hurt just enough, then looked away. "You regret choosing," Salith said. "Not an accusation, an observation." "I regret most things that matter," Ilan said. "It's how I know they mattered." She considered that. One of her long ears twitched, then stilled, as if she'd caught herself reacting too honestly. "Among my people, regret is seen as weakness." "That explains a lot," Ilan said. "Humans collect it like souvenirs." Silence settled again, not heavy this time, just present. The ship creaked around them, metal cooling, systems failing gracefully in the way only very expensive machines could. Ilan rested his arms on the railing and glanced sideways at her. "So," he said, "now that an ancient civilization has decided whatever we are, do you feel different?" She searched for the answer. "I feel," she said slowly, "unfinished." "Good," Ilan said. "That means you're alive." She almost smiled. "Almost?" A soft chime echoed behind them as one of the ship's internal projectors flickered on, uninvited. A lattice of symbols unfolded in the air, the same archaic geometry Ilan had learned to distrust. He groaned. "Please tell me that's not another clause." Salith's gaze sharpened. "Observers." "Of course," Ilan said. "Wouldn't want privacy." The symbols shifted, forming patterns that made Ilan's implants itch. He resisted the urge to swat at them. "Look," he said to the air. "If this is a performance review, I'd like to note that I acted under extreme circumstances and very limited instructions." The lattice pulsed, unimpressed. Salith straightened, voice taking on a formal cadence. "The rite has been fulfilled. There is nothing further for you to judge." The symbols hesitated. Then slowly they dimmed, retreating like something that had hoped for drama and been denied. Ilan exhaled. "See, teamwork." She glanced at him. "You speak to ancient systems, as if they were misbehaving subordinates." "It's a leadership skill," Ilan said. "You learn it right after yelling at printers." Below them, a shuttle lifted off, engines flaring bright against the darkening sky. The war was ending in pieces, not with a single decisive moment but with hundreds of small, tired ones. Ilan watched until the light vanished. "What will you do now?" Salith asked. He shrugged. "File reports, argue with command. Pretend this was all part of the plan. And after..." He looked at her then, really looked at the warrior who had survived honor, defeat, and an outcome none of her stories had prepared her for. "After," he said, "I figure it out." She nodded, accepting that answer more easily than he expected. "Then we are aligned." "That makes it sound intentional," Ilan said. "Intent," she said softly, "is learned." The ship groaned again, deeper this time, as if reminding them it would not wait forever. Ilan pushed off the railing and turned toward the interior. "Come on," he said. "Let's find somewhere that isn't about to collapse." She followed, then paused. "Ilan." "Yeah. Thank you," she said, awkward with the words as if they didn't fit her mouth yet. He smiled, small and tired. "Don't thank me," he said. "We're not done surviving yet." Command did not call. That was how Ilan knew things had gone badly. He sat on an upturned crate inside a temporary operations hub that had been assembled with the emotional investment of people who planned to abandon it soon. Consoles flickered, officers moved with purpose, and no one looked directly at Salith, which Ilan recognized as a professional courtesy and a personal failure. "You are being avoided," Salith said quietly. "They're being polite," Ilan replied. "Avoidance is how humans express panic with manners." A nearby officer tripped over a cable while not looking at her. Ilan winced. "Okay, maybe a little panic." Salith folded her arms, armor segments shifting with a faint mechanical murmur. "You did not inform your superiors." "I was hoping to ease them into it," Ilan said. "Like telling someone their house is haunted by starting with, 'So, funny story.'" The room lights dimmed abruptly. Every console froze. That got attention. A voice filled the space, not over comms, not through speakers, but everywhere at once, layered and patient in the way only something ancient could afford to be. "Outcome deviation acknowledged." Ilan closed his eyes. "You just had to say observers, didn't you?" Salith inclined her head. "They rarely intervene directly." "Great," Ilan said. "I love it when cosmic entities break routine." Symbols flared into existence above the central table, rearranging themselves into patterns that made several technicians sit down without being asked. Ilan stood, because sitting felt like surrender. "Clarify deviation," the voice requested. Ilan crossed his arms. "No." There was a pause. He imagined it as surprise because that was funnier. Salith stepped forward, posture formal. The rite was fulfilled. Selection was made. Continuance achieved. Continuance, Ilan echoed. "See, everyone's alive, or alive adjacent, that's a win." The symbols pulsed. "Bond parameters exceed projected limits." Ilan frowned. "That sounds like a you problem." Salith shot him a look. "You antagonize forces that predate stars." "They started it," Ilan said. The air tightened, pressure without weight. Ilan felt the familiar sensation of systems trying to read him and failing politely. He hated that part most. "Bond implies obligation," the voice said. "Human commander, your choice alters balance." "Everything alters balance," Ilan said. "That's what choices are." Another pause, longer this time. Salith's voice softened, losing some of its ceremonial edge. "What is it you seek?" The symbols shifted, focusing on her. "Purpose beyond extinction." She stiffened. Ilan spoke before she could. "You're welcome." She exhaled sharply. "This is not humor." "It's coping," Ilan said. "Different species, same trick." The voice seemed to consider them both. "Oversight will continue." Ilan groaned. "Of course it will." The symbols dimmed, systems rebooted, and the room returned to controlled chaos. Conversations resumed in hushed tones, as if everyone had silently agreed not to discuss what had just happened until several drinks later. Salith looked at Ilan. "You have complicated matters." "I have that effect," he said. "On governments, cultures, and occasionally coffee machines." She hesitated, then nodded once. "Still, you did not retreat." I don't like being told no by things that won't explain why, Ilan said. It's a character flaw. She watched him for a moment, then surprised him by smiling, brief, crooked, and gone almost immediately. Then perhaps, she said, we are equally flawed. A console chimed. Ilan glanced at it and sighed. That'll be command. He tapped the control, bracing himself. Captain, a voice said, carefully neutral. We're going to need you to explain something. Ilan looked at Salith, then back at the console. I was hoping you'd say that. He muted the channel and leaned closer to her. Any advice? She considered. In my culture, when elders disapprove, we challenge them to ritual combat. Ilan snorted, tempting. He unmuted the channel. All right, he said, let's talk. By the time the transport lifted off, Ilan had already been declared several things, none of which fit neatly on a uniform patch. The official term, delivered with heroic restraint by command, was *anomaly*. Unofficially, it was much worse. He sat strapped into a jump seat that had seen better centuries, listening to half a dozen channels argue about jurisdiction, precedent, and whether ancient alien rights counted as binding contracts under human law. He contributed nothing. Silence, he had learned, was sometimes the loudest way to disagree. Across from him, Salith watched the stars stretch into lines as the ship entered slip. She no longer braced herself as if expecting punishment from the universe. That alone felt like progress. You are being very calm, she said. I've reached the acceptance stage, Ilan replied. Somewhere after denial and before unemployment. She considered that. You may still be relieved of command. Probably, he said, but I've been relieved of worse things. The transport shuddered gently, a reminder that human engineering preferred optimism over guarantees. A small holographic interface flickered to life between them, projecting the last remnants of the temple's system, faded, compliant, no longer watching quite so closely. Observers disengaging, the interface announced, sounding faintly disappointed. Ilan leaned back. Good, I was starting to feel judged. Salith inclined her head toward the projection. They will not interfere again. Ever? Ilan asked. Not unless we give them a reason. He smiled. Let's disappoint them quietly then. The ship dropped out of slip with a lurch that rattled teeth and confidence. Ahead waited a human fleet holding position, weapons powered down but very much awake. Ilan felt the familiar tightening in his chest, not fear exactly but responsibility settling into place. A channel opened. Command's voice again, less rigid this time. Captain Rourke, you're cleared to dock. Captain Still. Ilan exhaled slowly, docking clamps engaged, the transport sealed. The hatch opened. Ilan stood, straightened his jacket and paused. You don't have to come, he said to Salith. I can make this bureaucratic. She rose as well. You chose. That binds us. I meant the meeting, he said. It's mostly arguing. She almost smiled. Then I should attend. I am very good at not backing down. The briefing room was quieter than Ilan expected. Admirals, analysts, diplomats, all looking at him like he was a variable they hadn't planned for. Salith stood beside him, calm, long ears catching the light as if daring anyone to comment. This conflict is over, Ilan said before anyone else could speak. Not because we won, but because we stopped. There was murmuring. He continued. The rite is concluded. Oversight has withdrawn. No hidden clauses. No looming apocalypse, I checked. One admiral cleared her throat. And the alien warrior. Salith stepped forward. I am no longer bound to extinction, nor to conquest. Ilan glanced at her. She's also not our prisoner. Silence stretched. Then a diplomat sighed. Of course she is. Hours later, after arguments, concessions, and one remarkably productive coffee break, it was done. Ceasefire ratified. Exchange protocols drafted. Salith granted protected envoy status, which she found hilarious once it was explained. So I am honored, she said, and restricted. Welcome to leadership, Ilan said. When it was over, truly over, Ilan found himself alone in the hangar, watching crews work with the quiet efficiency of people who believed tomorrow might exist. Salith joined him, hands clasped behind her back. "You are changed," she said. He thought about that, about choosing when he could have walked away, about not joking his way out of responsibility this time. "I think," he said slowly, "I stopped surviving and started deciding." She nodded. "That is how futures begin." A shuttle powered up nearby, bound for somewhere that wasn't a battlefield. Ilan gestured toward it. "Ready." She met his gaze, steady and unafraid. "Yes." They walked together toward the light of the open bay, not as victor and defeated, not as symbols, but as two people who had refused to let the universe make the choice for them. Behind them, no ancient system stirred. Ahead, for once, there was nothing watching.